Good afternoon. We are live at Buckingham Palace as commemorations begin to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day, the end of the Second World War in Europe. Tens of thousands of people, including members of the royal family and veterans of the war, have been watching a military procession through the capital. That was followed by a flypast of aircraft, including the Red Arrows, watched by the King and Queen and other members of the royal family from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Today's events are the beginning of 4 days of commemorations up to the actual anniversary on Thursday. Around Britain, street parties are in full swing on this Bank Holiday Monday.
Yorkshire, where one of thousands of street parties are happening up and down the country.
And this is the scene live this afternoon in London as we bring you all the details of the events so far. Hello, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Buckingham Palace, where the King has led the first commemorative events to mark 80 years since VE Day, the end of the Second World War in Europe. Thousands of people are gathered here. Some of them arrived very early this morning to secure a prime spot on the Mall behind me to watch that military procession through the centre of the capital. It was a particularly moving sight this year, with dozens of veterans watching, many of them, of course, well into their 90s, some of them older. Today is the first day of commemorations leading up to Thursday, the actual anniversary of VE Day. Members of the royal family, including the King and Queen Camilla, watched a flypast just in the last few minutes by the Red Arrows. They stood on the palace balcony just behind me watching that, and it really was quite a spine-tingling moment, and there was a very loud round of applause as the Red Arrows went over behind us here. We will be live in the crowds here and at a street party in Yorkshire as events take place around the UK. First, our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher reports on the day's events so far.
8 decades on, central London stands still and remembers.
My dear friends, this is your hour. This is not a victory of a party or of any class. It's a victory of the great British nation as a whole.
The words Winston Churchill spoke in 1945, telling a relieved nation the years of war in Europe were finally over.
Not only will the people of this island, but of the world, wherever the bird of freedom chirps in human hearts, look back to what we have done and they will say, do not despair. Do not yield to violence and tyranny. March straight forward and die, if need be, unconquered.
The emotion of that day caught on camera as crowds rushed to Buckingham Palace to witness the wartime leader with the royal family. 80 years ago, Alan Kennett was one of millions. Today, he is 1 in a million.
Thank you and your generation for securing our freedom 80 years ago. May I have your permission to start the parade, sir, please?
Carry on, sir.
"1,300 servicemen and women make their way down Whitehall, past the Union flag-draped cenotaph, a monument to those lost in war. Joining the British, Commonwealth and NATO personnel, a group of Ukrainian soldiers. A reminder of ongoing conflict in Europe. Then towards the Golden Victoria Memorial, where veterans sit with the royal family. The Princess of Wales chats with Bernard Morgan, a 101-year-old D-Day veteran, while the Princess Royal talks to Gilbert Clark, who lied about his age in order to join the RAF as a teenager. The youngest royals meeting some of those who sacrificed so much for our freedom. And Prince Louis making sure his father's uniform is spotless. Having witnessed the procession, the veterans are taken into the palace for a tea party with the royals. In 1945, thousands came here to celebrate the end of war in Europe. In 2025, thousands have come here to celebrate that wartime generation. And waves from the King as the royal family arrive on the balcony. Leading the RAF flypast, a lone Lancaster bomber, the aircraft that played such a pivotal part in the war. And concluding it, the Red Arrows roar over the Mall with their red, white and blue smoke trails. The royal family will now spend the afternoon with veterans, remembering their comrades, reflecting on that hard-fought victory and our 8 decades of freedom. Charlotte Gallagher, BBC News.
Well, as we saw there really are many, many thousands of people out on the streets of central London, down the Mall here, to witness all of those events today.
Well, as you've been hearing, it's been a day of celebration and remembrance across the capital to mark VE Day. Among the many events is a party that's currently in full swing on board HMS Belfast, which is moored on the Thames. A Royal Navy gun salute is planned for later. Well, let's cross to our reporter Wendy Hurrell, who is there for us. Wendy.
Well, Thomas, there is a chilly wind blowing along the River Thames, but a warm welcome to a tea party here on HMS Belfast. And among those invited, some remember living through the war, such as Bernard Smale. He was 12 years old when he was evacuated from his home in Dulwich. Returning later in the war to London, remembers 3 near misses of V1 rockets. And he had an incredible experience of missing his brother. So amongst the jubilation and the celebrations for VE Day, of course, there is a tinge of sadness, as you'll hear from him now.
I go through so much without thinking about my brother, and it brings back my brother. My brother was 7 years older than me, and I've got lovely pictures of him and I before the war, coming back with sandcastles from the beach. War started, goes straight into the RAF, gets in a bomber, goes into Germany, comes back and gets blown to pieces at 21. So when you say, you know, what do I think of, I suddenly remember him having his life cut short. And I find I'm very emotional when I...
Yeah, I can understand that. Bernard there remembering his brother Ronald. And sadly, as the years go past, there are fewer people that have those kinds of memories that lived through the Second World War. So it's ever more important that those stories are passed through the generations. And that's what the Imperial War Museum does here on HMS Belfast, particularly for the sea cadets that meet here every week. And Anna O'Neill has spent the day with them, getting their thoughts on the VE Day commemorations.
Ship's company, ho! Turn!
Roll call for the City of London Sea Cadets aboard a floating museum and one of the only remaining ships to have supported troops in Normandy in World War II. The cadets meet here on HMS Belfast twice a week for training and activities.
You get to do things like going outside, boating, community service like funding and all of that, and getting to learn orders.
It's really nice to be able to connect with the history of the ship. It makes teaching nautical subjects so much easier because it's much nicer to be able to teach port and starboard on an actual ship.
Not many cadets are on HMS Belfast. I mean, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something to brag about with other units. Yeah, it's very nice to speak with them, and then if they start some sort of argument, we can just say, we're on a boat, you're not.
And as well as bragging rights, being on board on the 80th anniversary of VE Day means a lot to these young people.
I think it's one of the most prominent examples of standing up to bullies, really.
So we've done a lot on VE Day. I think, it was a monumental moment at the end of probably, I would say, the biggest war of the century, of the history of humanity.
So my grandfather was on a ship called HMS Antwerp.
One of the staff has a personal connection to World War II. Claire's grandfather, Dennis Roach, took part in the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943.
Making them understand what actually VE Day is, what it stands for. But I think when you give it a personal spin, they understand it a lot more. How would they feel if that was their grandparent or dad?
In celebrating VE Day on a warship that played such an important role in the Allied victory, these young cadets can be proud of Britain's military past and maybe even one day play a role in its future. Anna O'Neill, BBC London.
Well, HMS Belfast was so instrumental in getting us to victory in the Second World War, and she will be a key part of the gun salute that marks the commemorations today a little bit later on this afternoon. For now, back to you, Thomas.